She was ranked outside the top 140 players on Earth. She had never won 2 tour-level matches in a row in her entire career. And in the space of 18 months, she would go from a nobody handed a wild card out of pity to the player that Grand Slam champions dread seeing across the net. This is the story of how a 20-year-old from Manila, training on a small island off the coast of Spain, quietly built one of the most explosive rises women's tennis has seen in a decade, and how almost nobody saw it coming until it was far too late to stop her. But here's the part that should really stop you in your tracks. The player she humiliated first, the one who handed her the win that changed everything, wasn't some journeyman ranked in the 200s. It was a former world number 1, a 6-time Grand Slam champion. And Alexandra Eala didn't just beat her once. She would do it again on the biggest stage in tennis a year later with the entire tournament watching. How does a teenager with almost no tour experience, no home tournament, and a country that had never produced a single top 100 player in the sport's modern history keep doing this to the best players alive? Stick around, because the answer says a lot more about grit than it does about talent. Before we get into it, if stories like this one, the underdogs, the outsiders, the athletes nobody was supposed to bet on, are the kind of thing you want more of, go ahead and subscribe now. It genuinely helps this channel keep telling these stories, and you will not want to miss what happens by the end of this one. Let's rewind to where this really starts, because it isn't Miami, and it isn't some overnight discovery. Alexandra Eala grew up in the Philippines, a country with a passionate sporting culture, but almost no pedigree in professional tennis. At 12 years old, she left home for the Rafael Nadal Academy in Mallorca, Spain, the training ground built by one of the greatest competitors the sport has ever produced. She idolized Nadal specifically for his relentlessness, the refusal to fold when a match turns ugly. That mentality would end up defining her entire career. The junior results came first. In 2022, still a teenager, Eala won the US Open girls singles title, becoming the first Filipino player ever to win a junior Grand Slam championship. It was a milestone, a proof of concept. But junior tennis and professional tennis are different sports wearing the same uniform, and for the next 2 years, the transition was brutal. She grinded through lower-tier ITF events, picked up ranking points wherever she could find them, and by 2024 had crept up to a career-high ranking in the 140s. Respectable, unremarkable, the kind of ranking that gets you into qualifying rounds, not headlines. Then March 2025 happened, and nothing about her career looked the same again. Eala arrived at the Miami Open as a wild card, ranked 140th in the world, with a career tour-level record of 2 wins and 14 losses. She had never beaten a top 40 opponent. Nobody outside of hardcore tennis circles knew her name. She was, by every reasonable measure, a footnote in the draw, the kind of player broadcasters mention once and then forget. She opened by beating then world number 43 Katie Volinets. Fine, a solid start, nothing more. Next up was Jelena Ostapenko, a former French Open champion known for hitting the ball like she's trying to break it. Eala went down 4-0 in the first set, looked finished, and then didn't finish. She clawed her way back to win in a first-set tiebreak, then closed it out in straight sets. That's when people started paying attention. Then came Madison Keys, the reigning Australian Open champion at the time, ranked 5th in the world. Eala beat her in straight sets, her first career win over a top 10 player. A walkover past an injured Paula Badosa put her into the quarterfinals, and that's where the story stopped being a nice underdog run and became something the entire sport had to sit up and talk about. Waiting in the quarterfinals was Iga Swiatek, 5-time Grand Slam champion, former world number 1, a player who, at that point in her career, had lost to someone ranked outside the top 100 only twice in her entire life. Eala fell behind 4-2 in the second set after splitting the first 2. This was supposed to be the moment reality reasserted itself, where the fairy tale run met a wall named Iga Swiatek and quietly ended. Instead, Eala won 4 straight games to close out the second set, and with it, the match. 6-2, 7-5. Swiatek sent a backhand long on match point, and a 19-year-old wild card from a country with zero history in the top 100 dropped to her knees on a WTA 1000 court, having just beaten 3 Grand Slam champions in a row without dropping a set to any of them. Nobody had ever done that as a wild card in the history of the Miami Open. She became the first Filipina to reach a tour-level semifinal, and inside a single fortnight, she was projected to leap roughly 65 spots in the world rankings, straight into the top 100. Here's a number that puts it in perspective. Going into that tournament, Eala's entire career prize money sat at just under $500,000. Her semifinal finish alone paid out more than two-thirds of that amount in one paycheck. She'd been playing professional tennis for years, grinding through the sport's lower rungs for a fraction of what she earned in 2 weeks in Florida. You'd think that kind of run would be the story of her year. It wasn't even the story of her year yet. There was more coming, and it was going to matter even more to the millions of people back home who had just discovered her existed. Because here's the thing about the Philippines and tennis. It is not historically a tennis nation. Basketball dominates the sporting conversation there almost completely. And for decades, the closest thing the country had to a tennis legacy dated back to the amateur era, to players like Felicissimo Ampon competing generations ago, long before anyone alive today was watching. There was no modern reference point, no recent hero to point to. Eala wasn't just winning matches. She was constructing an entire sporting identity for a country that had never had one in this sport. That reality hit its next milestone in August 2025 at the US Open. Eala entered ranked 75th in the world, a number that alone represented a staggering climb from where she'd started the year. In the first round, she drew Clara Tauson, the 14th seed. It did not go smoothly. Eala found herself down 5-1 in the deciding third set, one bad service game away from an early exit in the tournament that mattered most. She didn't fold. She won 5 straight games to force a tiebreak, and then survived a marathon tiebreak that stretched to 13 points to 11, sealing a 3-set win that made her the first player representing the Philippines to win a Grand Slam main draw match in the Open era. Flushing Meadows sits close to a large Filipino community in Queens, and the crowd that showed up to support her that day made it feel, in her own words afterward, like a home match in a tournament where she'd never had one before. By the end of 2025, Eala closed the season with a career-high ranking of 50 in the world. Consider that trajectory for a second. January, outside the top 140. December, inside the top 50. A country with no top 100 history now had a player one step from the world's elite, and she wasn't done climbing. 2026 opened with more of the same relentless improvement. A semi-final run at the Auckland Classic in January pushed her to a new career-high ranking of 49. Indian Wells followed in March, where she'd earned a seed for the first time in a WTA 1000 event. She advanced to the 4th round, beating Coco Gauff along the way, before her run ended against Linda Noskova. It was still enough to lift her to a new career high of 29 in the world, a number that would have sounded like fantasy to her a year earlier. The clay season that followed was rougher. Eala hit resistance in Linz, in Stuttgart, in Madrid, exits that reminded everyone she was still a young player finding her footing on a surface that historically hasn't suited her game. Her ranking dipped as the points from her Miami breakthrough began rolling off the board. For a few months, it looked like the meteoric rise might be leveling off into something more ordinary. Then Wimbledon arrived, and Eala delivered the single biggest moment of her career to date. Seeded 29th, she worked her way to the 3rd round, where the draw handed her a rematch with the exact player who had launched her into the spotlight in the first place. Iga Swiatek. Except this time, Swiatek wasn't a fading former number 1 looking to rebuild. She was the defending Wimbledon champion, the 3rd seed, playing on the grass court where she'd lifted the trophy 12 months earlier. What followed was one of the most dramatic sets of the entire tournament. The opening set alone ran 84 minutes. Eala was broken while serving for the set at 5-3, fought all the way to a tiebreak, saved 2 set points along the way, and finally converted on her 4th set point to win a tiebreak that stretched all the way to 20 points. She then broke Swiatek 3 times in the 2nd set to close out the match, 7-6, 6-2. On court afterward, Eala could barely finish her sentences through the tears. She tried to put into words what the moment meant, comparing her own journey to legends like Swiatek or Serena and Venus Williams, players for whom a 4th-round Wimbledon run might seem routine, before breaking down completely, unable to finish describing what it meant to have come from where she came from to reach that court. The win made her the first Filipino player, male or female, to reach the second week of a Grand Slam tournament in the Open era, eclipsing marks that had stood since the amateur era of Philippine tennis, decades before she was born. She went on to face Jasmine Paolini in the fourth round and lost a tight three-setter. But the damage to the record books, and to how the sport viewed her, was already done. She left London with a new career-high ranking of 28 and a head-to-head record against Swiatek that now stood 2 wins to 1 in her favor. The grass season didn't stop there. She backed it up with a WTA 125 title in Birmingham and a semi-final run at the WTA 500 event in Berlin, a stretch so dominant that the WTA's own fan vote named her the standout player of the entire grass court swing, beating out that year's actual Wimbledon champion and runner-up for the honor. And then, just weeks ago, she topped all of it. At the Mubadala DC Open, a WTA 500 event in Washington, Eala fought through arguably the hardest draw of her career. She beat Olympic gold medalist Zhang Qinwen. She beat the tournament's defending champion, Leylah Fernandez. She beat world number 10 Alina Svitolina. She beat 4-time Grand Slam champion Naomi Osaka. And in a rain-delayed final against world number 3 Jessica Pegula, she came through 4-6, 6-4, 6-love to win the title, her first WTA Tour singles title. The first ever won by a Filipina player in the history of the sport. Stop and actually absorb what that run represents. In one tournament across 1 week, a 21-year-old beat an Olympic champion, a defending champion, a top 10 player, and a 4-time major winner back-to-back-to-back-to-back, and then closed it out against a top 3 player in the world in a final. That is not a lucky week. That is not a fluke draw. That is a player who has fully arrived. So where does this actually leave her? As of right now, Eala sits inside the top 30 players on the planet, a staggering distance from the outside, the top 140 wildcard who showed up in Miami with nothing to lose. Her head-to-head record against top 10 opponents currently sits at 7 wins against just 4 losses, a ratio most established stars would envy. She has now beaten Iga Swiatek twice in 3 meetings. She has taken down Grand Slam champions on hard courts, on grass, in 3-set battles, and in straight-set blowouts. She has done all of it as the only player on the entire WTA Tour representing her country, without the benefit of a home tournament to build confidence in front of a friendly crowd, without the infrastructure that surrounds players from tennis powerhouse nations. And yet, every time the sport seems ready to write her off as a talented but inconsistent rising star, she answers with another statement win against someone ranked inside the top 10. The question now isn't whether Alexandra Eala belongs among the best players in the world. She has already answered that, repeatedly, against opponents with a combined haul of Grand Slam titles that would make most careers. The real question is how much higher this climb actually goes. From outside the top 140 to a WTA Tour champion inside the top 30 in under 18 months, with wins over Grand Slam champions littered across nearly every surface the sport is played on. If this is what the rise looks like before she's even cracked the top 20, the rest of women's tennis has every reason to be paying very close attention to what comes next.